very thankful to KLF, to Rashmi ji, to the entire Ashok ji and everyone in the organizing committee. Lipika, to your question, I think it was George Orwell, the English novelist, who had said in his novel 1984 that the best way to destroy a people is to deny and obliterate their understanding of their own history. And I think this is something that our colonial masters and also, sadly, the people who ruled us after independence understood very well. It's a different issue that the current regime does not understand that. At least since the past 200 years, history being weaponized, it's not something that today it's a new happening that's going on. Of course, today all primetime debates are on Aurangzeb these days. Sometimes you begin to wonder if Aurangzeb and Tipu Sultan are contesting elections because we are discussing more about them than about contemporary issues and not leaving history and historical characters to academic discourse. But it is inevitable because history has always been the handmaiden of the ruler. Whose history is it anyway, after all? The one who has the dominant power is the one who crafts that narrative. And there are numerous, landmines when it comes to Indian historiography, a lot of it which our colonial masters implanted in our mind, which we very, very faithfully carried out after independence with some more distortions, ideological contortions to it, which made the issue more murkier. When I was picked up from the airport, there was a very nice, affable volunteer of the Kalinga Lit Fest. I won't name him or the university where he studies. He told me he's doing an undergrad in literature and the subjects included English and history and also, I think, philosophy. So I asked him, what history do you learn? So he said, largely it is about the Mughals. And this is a state government run, university. I said, do you learn about Odisha's history? He said, unfortunately, no. About the Gajapati dynasty? No, we have not read that in our undergrad level. Has there been discussion about Gajapati Kapilendra? No, we haven't heard about that. What about the Paika rebellion? No, that is not part of the curriculum. And this is a state government run, institution. So it speaks a lot about what we make relevant in our history. In a country as vast as this, and by a people who keep telling us there was nothing called India till the British came and unified us, so to say that there is a central history and there are regional histories. What is regional and what is a centripetal force in a country as diverse as this? The Gajapatis, when they ruled almost, touching the borders of Vijayanagar till the Indo-Gangetic plains in Bengal, that is as vast an empire as probably Akbar's was. So why on earth are we to consider only Delhi as the centrifugal force of our country and all other parts of India not being able to reclaim their story? I think Bharat needs to snatch back her history from this Delhi-centric narrative.
And I think that was one of the reasons for you to found FIHCR. Why don't you, before I go a little bit, before I go a little bit towards, a little bit more into that organization and what it does. One thing that comes from your initial, address is that there is a lot that's been lost. And I think that's what you started to capture when you started writing. And with the Wadiyars, with the Bravehearts, with Savarkar, with Tipu. Before I touch upon the more controversial part of your writing, let's start with the Wadiyars. Why was that story important to be told?
I must confess here, as I've done in several forums, that as a child who was growing up in school, history was my most hated subject. Almost every class meant kneeling down outside class because the maximum punishment I got was for this subject, because memorizing by rote as to who succeeded whom and which battle was fought in which era, it just didn't make any sense to me growing up. But at that time, I think some of you may remember, there was a very popular serial on television. The only channel that we all saw was Doordarshan, and in that we had The Sword of Tipu Sultan by Sanjay Khan, where he played the lead role too. Now, in that, to glorify Tipu, whose father Hyder Ali was a usurper of the Mysore throne, the Wadiyars, the original Hindu rulers who ruled for 600 years, from 1399 till the time of India's independence, they were shown in a very, very poor light. The Maharaja of Mysore was shown like this, obese retard who's dancing with the court dancer, totally emasculated. and you have this Maharani who was shown, like this typical vamps from one of those Ekta Kapoor serials, all the time conspiring and conniving against Tipu Sultan. And about that, there were lots of protests in different parts of Karnataka, the state I come from, where even now, after 80 years, of the royal family ceasing to exist, there is a lot of regard and reverence for the Mysore royal family, for the good work they have done, the foundations of modern Karnataka that they established. Even the premier studio in Mysore, where the shooting was happening, that caught fire, if you remember, and Sanjay Khan's face had got burnt. And a lot of Kannada media was doing speculations that this is the curse of the Wadiyar. You showed him in this light, so you have to pay a price for this. So this young boy like me who was kneeling down outside class and did not like this subject that much, I don't know what it did to me personally. I decided on a whim that I need to bring out the truth about, or know the truth, not even bring out, know for myself the truth about this one king and queen who were misrepresented. My family had nothing to do with Mysore. I'm half Tamilian, half Maharashtrian. There's no connect that way other than the fact that we've been living in Bangalore. So every vacation meant going to Mysore, meeting members of the royal family, historians, archivists, all of these scholars there. And slowly the interest expanded to the entire 600-year period of their rule. And after that, after 10 long years of carrying on with this madness, I realized that there was not a single book that was written on them in the modern times. Again, the same Delhi centricity, where large parts of the place I come from, South India, or for that matter, Odisha or Northeast India, do not feature in the narrative called Bharatiya Itihas. So there's a very famous quote of Toni Morrison, the English novelist, who says, if there is a book that you want to read and it hasn't been written yet, then you must be the first one to write it. So it was with that idea that my first book, Splendors of Royal Mysore, it came out rather serendipitously, I must say, in 2008, about 18 years ago. And I thought it would be a one-book wonder. I'll get back to my, very boring day job that I had those days, calculating profit and loss of some American company and thinking I'll die one day with no one even shedding a tear or remembering who I was. But thankfully, I think destiny had better plans and one led to the other. But in that, the central theme there has been, the same reclamation of lost histories, of lost people and communities who all need to find a space in a diverse nation like ours, whose history is not defined in a monolith or in a unitary fashion.
And 18 years later, then you decided to revisit that part, but with a greater insight into Tipu's life.
Yeah.
And not just Tipu's life, but you've started the book with his father's, Hyder Ali's life. So what triggered that?
No, the trigger was right then, that though in the 600 years, the interregnum of Mysore, where Hyder Ali usurps the throne of his own benefactor, the Maharaja of Mysore, and his son, they rule all for 40 years. But these 40 years changed the very course of Indian history, so to say. You had 4 very bloody Anglo-Mysore wars, and at the end of the 4th Anglo-Mysore war, post that very steadily, the capitulation of India to colonial power also begins. So even at that time, I wanted to zoom in further into these 40 years and delve deeper. But a lot of things happened which were rather unfortunate then. So while talking about that first book, which came out when I was probably just 26, 27, I didn't know that the world of history writing is full of so many sharks and landmines. I very naively believed that history meant talking the truth. And so it was that in one of those lectures in Bangalore, I was actually reading out letters of Tipu Sultan himself, where he very, very proudly gloats that I have converted about 4 lakh kafirs, infidels in Calicut. He orders his commanders to go and break so many temples or churches and wears all this as a medallion of pride and honor. Now, while I was doing that, an audience which was hitherto civilized, like here, a section of them suddenly broke up in protest. They were paper rockets that were thrown at the podium. Maybe to resurrect the memory of Tipu's Mysorean rockets, and the commotion that followed somehow led to the talk being stopped midway, and I was ushered away backstage. But my poor father was sitting in the first row, and somebody in the audience, some Tipu fan club or some such person, came and gave him an envelope and told him in rather menacing words that you have only one son, and if you want him to live long, please ask him to mind what he writes and talks. And I think 2 to 3 weeks later, it was my bad destiny that I had written a series of articles was to be written, commissioned by the Deccan Herald newspaper in Bangalore on the Diwans of Mysore. And it started with Purnaya, who was both Hyder and Tipu's Diwan. In that there were some references to Tipu, and that again caused a furor. Right in the heart of Bangalore, in front of the newspaper's office, these people, some protesters had gathered, and they were demanding an apology. And the editor called me and asked me about it. I said, over my dead body, I'm not going to apologize, because everything that I've written is based on facts. And so the editor was willing to give them twice the amount of space to rebut me. But obviously that was not a group which was there for any kind of intellectual rebuttal. So they even burnt my effigy there and so on. And the editor actually sent me a picture of my burning effigy. It was a rather a very badly made effigy, I must say. And I actually kept it as my Orkut profile picture for long. That was the only social media we had those days in 2008. Nazar utar gayi, you know, so many people burning your effigy means it's good for you. But in those days, my mother used to keep very poor health. And so she almost made me promise that never in public are you going to talk or write about this man ever. And when your mother tells you something, you better listen. And so I actually, you know, kept up my word. I promised her I'll never do it. We lost her in 2018, and that is when I thought, when the promise you make to someone, if that person herself is not alive, then the promise is also invalid. And so breaking that promise, and dil ki bhadaas nikalni thi, 15 years of suppressed emotion. So that's why that spread over 900 odd pages of this new book on Tipu Sultan, which tries to reposition him, his policy, his legacy, very troubled legacy, and the several controversies that surround his very stormy 17 years of rule in Mysore.
And you've been continuing to dare with many more such characters from history that you've brought alive. But before we move on to that, anybody who reads you knows that you are one of the few historians, if I may say so, who are able to provide a balanced perspective to
I'm glad you think
figures.
so.
But why is it such? Itihas means as it happened, and one has, a historian has that responsibility to state it so and write it that way. Why do you think what has been the compulsion for historians so far to not be able to do their jobs properly? Is it more to do with is it a political compulsion? I wanted to understand that better in order for people here to understand why is it difficult for people to really be true to what they are doing, especially in terms of history.
Yeah. See, I think this subject hits the very nub of our identity, who we are as a nation, as a people, as a civilization. And so that is why, as again quoting George Orwell, he said, he who controls the past controls the future. And the colonial masters, as I mentioned, understood it very well. So they perpetuated certain myths. One being, you know, the fact that we as India, we never existed. We were never a nation at all. It was the British Raj which cemented us together into a very ahistorical and unnatural entity called India. And I think somewhere...
Which we are continued to be told even today.
Yeah, exactly. I was just coming to that a lot of us educated Indians, subliminally somewhere we believe in that myth, that, you know, the British came, otherwise we were all fighting amongst each other as warring states. And it was they who unified us into a political entity. They gave us railways and education and culture and all of these things. We somehow subliminally believe in that myth, not realizing, that there's a difference between a nation state and a nation. A nation state can be defined by common codified laws or political borders, but a nation is a very long-standing common sense of, emotional connect to a territory or a cultural entity. And in that we see astonishing convergence over the centuries and millennia in what our ancestors have thought about of this piece of land, this Bhukhanda, as a sacred geography. Why even in our Sankalpa that we do in our pujas, it starts with Jambudvipe, Bharatavarshe, Bharatakhande. You are very clearly marking out the territory, saying this is the area where I am sitting, which is called Bharatvarsha. And you go to the Vishnu Puran, right from, some say it's in 4th century BC, some say it's 8th century CE, whatever it may be, there is a very clear enunciation which says, Uttaram yat samudrasya himadraschaiva dakshinam varshatad bharatam nama bharati yatra santati. This entire landmass north of the oceans and south of the Himalayas, that Varsha or country is called Bharat, and its Santati or progeny are called Bharatiyas. Now what more can be a clearer enunciation of what a nation is? So that understanding was very clear in the cultural imagination of this country. So they struck at this first very, very important element of our identity as a country, as a people. Now when Adi Shankaracharya, when he goes in the 8th century, as we would largely want to believe, goes on his Digvijay Yatra, he probably lived for 30-35 years. In that he produced prolific scholarship, as we all know. Now he could have done that sitting in his small little village in Kerala. But he does 3 Digvijayas across the length and breadth of this country. And he also establishes the 4 cardinal mutts. South, Sringeri, you have the east, you have Puri, Badrinath in the north, and Dwarka in the west. By doing that, he almost circumscribed the map of India, the map of Bharatavarsha. And then to cap it all up, he establishes the Sarvagnya Peeth, the all-knowing Peeth in Kashmir. Kashmir as the capital of Indian knowledge, traditions. Where Sharada Devi was the presiding goddess, and also the script itself was Sharada. So in all of these, you see the way our Jyotirlingas are scattered, or the Shakti Peethas. They all somewhere give you this cultural map of what Bharat is. So nation states can change, borders can change. What the subcontinent looked like in 1945, in 2 years, the McMahon line and others were drawn on a piece of paper, and you had different countries. After independence, maybe 20 years ago, what Andhra Pradesh looked like, you draw a line and you have Andhra and Telangana, you have Uttarakhand and, Uttar Pradesh. So these things can change, laws can change, but that common sense of connection which people had, that is what makes a nation. So when Adi Shankaracharya went all over this place, nobody said, you are coming from another country, so we will not allow you to come here. What language did they communicate with each other? Today, when the language issue is also so much under fire everywhere. So I think this very basic foundational element that the British struck at of our identity, sadly, I think after independence, the so-called Nehruvian consensus and the Marxist historiography has only perpetuated this to make it even worse.
We're often told that the reasons for the first set of leaders for this country to keep a lot under wraps was because we had seen a bloody partition and they wanted things to remain calm after that, and they wanted to focus on better things than just talk about things that would again unruffle feathers. Tell us, how fair would this justification to their acts be?
As a historian, I wouldn't think that is justified, because if that logic worked, then you couldn't even talk about so many other, inequalities in Indian society. Talking about caste oppression would then cause schisms between the so-called upper caste and the so-called lower caste. So should we not talk about that too as a reality? We do that. We do that in our history books. We do it in our literature. We do it copiously in popular culture, media, cinema, and so on. There we do not think that by doing this, there will be enmity between different groups within the Hindu society. So to break the Hindu society is perfectly fine. But if you're actually talking the facts of history, you said itihasa, that very word in Sanskrit, translates to it thus happened. Ye aise hua tha. If that is how it is, present it as it is. You cannot retrofit it for today's requirements, today's politics. And Lipika, I think the biggest disservice you do to communities today, and I'll particularly name the Muslims of India, is to somewhere assume that talking about the atrocities of barbaric invaders like Ghazni and Ghori and Timur and Aurangzeb and Tipu Sultan and all these people will somehow upset them. Why should it upset them? By doing that, you are somewhere hyphenating them with these people. I constantly repeat everywhere that people today, communities today, the Muslims of today are not responsible for all these atrocities. But the reverse is also true, that people of today should not, valorize them as what is happening right now. Do not think of these people as your role models, which sadly many sections do. And your assumption that if you talk all of this, social harmony will somehow get upset. Now, we talk very openly about the atrocities committed by the British. In every movie, the British is the bad guy. We talk about Churchill as, the man who caused the Bengal famine, marauder, and all of that, and rightly so. While doing that, none of us think that the Christians of India will be very upset if we did that, because they belong to the same religion as Churchill. But why is it that only when you have to talk about these characters, this kind of attitude comes? A community doesn't need icons of its own faith. A Muslim in India can have icons from Buddhism or Jain or Hindu or Christian or any other religion. Now, even if you want someone of the same sect, instead of Aurangzeb, you have a Dara Shikoh. Why is he not valorized as much as Aurangzeb, who actually destroyed the so-called myth of the Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, both literally and figuratively, by beheading his brother, who was the one who started this whole idea of a Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. So we are actually valorizing the man who destroyed all traces of that syncretic, culture, if at all it even existed. So I think this de-hyphenation is very important. Will Durant had called the Islamic conquest of India as one of the bloodiest tales of human history, not just of Indian history, but of human history. Historians like K.S. Lal have estimated that between 1000 CE and 1526, by the time the Mughal Sultanate came into existence, the subcontinent's population decreased by 8 crores. 8 crore people actually killed, not because of the weather, they didn't drop down dead, but it was a targeted genocide and murder. Many others like Sitaram Goyalji and others have estimated at the least about 2,000 temples destroyed. All our educational institutions, our Princetons and Oxfords and Cambridges in India, like Takshashila, Nalanda, Vikramshila, Udantapuri, were all destroyed. And when Bakhtiyar Khilji attacks Nalanda, it is said that the number of manuscripts there were so immense that it burned for 6 months. 6 months of destruction. How much of knowledge had been destroyed in that one attack. But what do we find today? You go to the Nalanda ruins and you come outside, the village you see there is Bakhtiyarpur. Now you tell me, in which other country in this whole world will we be have such a historical amnesia that you actually valorize and hero worship a man who destroyed your Princeton and Oxford and Cambridge? So that says a lot about our collective historical consciousness as Indians, which is very, very sad, and just obliterating it, putting these uncomfortable truths under a carpet is not going to make them go away. Today is the time of information. Everybody who has a smartphone can have access to information. It is not one elite group sitting in JNU or Aligarh who will let you know what your own past is. As someone had said, history is too important to be left only to the historians. It is everybody's, bequest. It belongs to everyone. So people who are going to find out the truth, and truth always has a very inconvenient way of showing up when you don't, actively look for it. And that's what is happening today. We are seeing these schisms play out. We saw it in Ayodhya. We are seeing it in Kashi and Mathura, in the Gyanvapi and the Krishna temple case, in Sambhal, in Bhojshala, in Dhar, in so many places. So I think the time has come where we as a mature nation, as a democracy, make peace with our past and tell the truth as it is without putting the albatross of that blame on anybody. Have a truth and reconciliation commission, just like what South Africa had after apartheid. You had this whole thing of Ubuntu, where Desmond Tutu, brought the victim and the perpetrator together, and the perpetrator would look into the eye of the victim and say, "I'm sorry for what I did." Here, of course, the victim and the perpetrator are both dead. But there is an intergenerational memory, there is an intergenerational trauma that somewhere subconsciously exists in people. And to step into the future, into the greatness that India is at the threshold of achieving, we must make peace with our past. And as a historian, I'm telling you that we should not live in our past. we should move out of it only by making peace with it, not by obliterating it, not through denial that is led only and only by political expediency.
You made a few very important points right from the start up until now. One was about how a boy from here doesn't know about some of the greatest rulers from this land. You talked about the civilizational memory that allowed us to carry forward our history through people, even after facing so many destructions of some of our most prestigious learning centers. You also talked about how it is time for us to find reconciliation, and how we need to come to terms with the fact that today's generation is not to be identified with the kind of work or the kind of destruction that was done by their ancestors. But then that also brings us to the question...
Not even their ancestors.
Yeah.
Babar and Khilji were not
True.
the ancestors of today's Muslims.
True.
Even some of them might want to believe so, but it is not the case.
They're made to believe so. But in all of this, Vikram, what we at times also struggle with is how and where to start. Now, I come from Uttarakhand. In our village, there's folklore, there's through music, that we come to know of our ancestors. If we talk about this land and just the vastness of this land, as you said, has so many hidden stories and tales in the history that we need to tell. How does one start to discover more and get into that process? Because that is also something that you try to do through your foundation, the Foundation of History and Cultural Research.
Yeah, I must mention here that it's very easy to always complain, saying this is wrong, that is wrong. A lot of distortion has happened. In almost all conclaves of the non-left, you have right in the middle of the stage one mythical voodoo doll, or say of Professor Romila Thapar, Professor Irfan Habib, all these people, and you keep sticking pins to it, saying they are the ones who did all this distortion. Fine, it's happened, it's done. They've produced a vast body of literature in several decades of their existence. But what is the counter to that? Where is an alternative scholarship to this so-called distorted history? The only and only answer to distorted history is more and more scholarship. And that is something we do not realize. YouTube videos, podcasts, these are not going to be, able to supplement a well-researched book which will last longer. And as a writer in a literature festival, I'd love to believe that books will outlast the life of the writer. And so that has a much more tangible impact. So with that in mind, to say, be the change that you want to see, a very small step that we've taken is the establishment of the Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research, FIHCR. And I'm very glad that there are two people in the audience from the organization. One is Satyajit Ojha, who's from here, and he actually leads the fellowship team in FIHCR. And you have Shan Kashyap, who's pursuing his PhD at Ravenshaw here, who's a fellow of the institute. So what FIHCR does is to promote this alternative scholarship, new scholarship, through various wings that we have. One vertical is the entire fellowship model, where through a fellowship instituted in the name of Sir Jadunath Sarkar, whom all of us have forgotten, a brilliant, pre-independent nationalist historian, we actually select about 8 scholars, 5 to 8 scholars every year, who are given a liberal enough stipend of about 15 lakhs over the course of 1 year, with a lot of mentorship and help. And the only ask from them is at the end of that 1 year, they must come up with a publish-worthy manuscript. So every year, 5 to 10 new books are added to the kitty. Then at the end of 10 years, I think you'll have a larger body of about 100 books. And then at least the readers have an option to choose from. It's finally their choice. Nobody can influence or force someone to anything, but at least look at an alternative viewpoint. Then we also have another group called the projects team, where you see the problem with Indian history is it is written in languages that none of us understand, by and large, whether it is Sanskrit, Pali, Prakrit, Old Tamil, or Persian, Arabic. And we rely only and only on translations. Translations made by Westerners who are either have imperfect knowledge of the language or it is a malicious propaganda. In Vedic Sanskrit, one word can have 4 or 5 meanings depending on the context in which it is used. So we thought it is very important to actually indulge or create a multidisciplinary group where a modern historian also, interacts regularly with an archaeologist. Historians and archaeologists never talk to each other, though the two subjects are so closely allied with each other. Why? Because all the distortions of history can be destroyed by archaeology. Archaeology is a science. They where 1 plus 1 cannot be 4 or 5 depending on whether you're a rightist or a leftist. It has to have and all this fabricated history will get destroyed by that the archaeological evidences. So archaeologists, a Sanskrit Pandit, we are doing a first, and important to talk about it in Kalinga, that we're doing our first project with the Nalanda University, which is on the rise and fall of Buddhism in Bharat, where along with a historian, there's an archaeologist, there's a Sanskrit scholar, there's someone who knows Pali and Prakrit, Tibetan, a Buddhist monk, all of us trying to go back to the primary sources, look at what they have said, the Tripitaka, the Divyavadana, Ashokavadana, Mahavamsha, Deepavamsha, all these different texts of the time, and basis that reconstruct the story in our own understanding. And another wing we have is called Yuva, which is to actually make history interesting, exciting and inspiring for children and young adults. Now we are a nation of storytellers. We've always believed in telling stories through art, through music, through dance, through epics. Where have we lost this whole culture of storytelling when it comes to telling our own past, our own stories? So in order to ensure that the future generation is not like me kneeling down outside class, at least the future youngsters would like to understand that this is such an important and interesting and exciting subject. Yuva tries to talk to them in their language through Instagram videos or through documentaries, through modern technology like virtual reality and artificial intelligence and so on, all with an attempt to make history accessible and interesting for people. So this is a large gamut of activities we have tried. It's a very small attempt, but with the right intent that we want to democratize history and also provide an alternative version to the existing distortions that exist.
You talked about providing alternatives, and one thing that I know with Vikram's work, what's happened is even the Marxist historians are now coming back, revisiting the history and coming back with alternatives. They're all, not just the Marxist historians, people who we believed to have their head in the right place have again come back with their alternative version of another very controversial character, Savarkar. Tell me what makes that person so much of an area of interest, a person of interest. So what's the enigma? What is the man about that he continues to, be the center of all our conversations every single day?
I'm so glad that at least he's a part of conversations today. After, my 2 volumes came out on him, there've been a series of,
attempts to
talk about him. There was a time, and I must remind the audience here who might not know, at the heights of Nehruvian tolerance, we had someone of the eminence of Pandit Hridaynath Mangeshkar, the brother of Lataji and Ashaji. Now, Savarkar, in addition to being a fiery revolutionary, a political ideologue who popularized Hindutva, was also a very gifted Marathi poet. And so he had written several poems, and a couple of them, I think Hridaynath ji had tuned it to music. Ne majasi ne parat matra bhumila sagara pran talmalala jayostute Shri Mahan Mangale Shivaspade Shubhade. All these different poems, very beautiful, and all the sisters, Asha ji, Lata ji, all of them, they sang it and recorded it. Now at that time, Hridaynath Mangeshkar was working in the All India Radio, and he gets a show cause notice for this, saying, can you explain why you picked up this poem? And he gives a very nonchalant answer saying, good poem, very good poet, so I chose it, reason enough to tune it. And for this crime that he did of choosing this poem and poet, he actually lost his job from the All India Radio. And he's on record stating it in several channels and interviews. Now, at a time, now we say intolerance has begun now, we are not tolerant to each other's views. What is this? Where you are actually, people lose their livelihoods if they actually talk about somebody. He's a political untouchable. The sad contradiction is a man who championed the eradication of untouchability all his life, or caste divisions all his life, actually becomes a political pariah and is not even spoken about. So today I'm glad that he is being discussed. He's controversial because he's made to be controversial, and it's not that anybody could be controversial depending on how you present that person. But then the fact that here was a man who tried to unite the Hindu society, break down the caste distinctions, thoughts which were way ahead of his times, whether it comes to rational scientific thought, his views on what role India would have in the Committee of Nations after gaining freedom, militarily armed India which can protect herself and establish peace comes at a cost. Only if you're powerful you can be peace, you can get peace. Nobody listens to the weak. So these things that he spoke of, and of course the much debated, hated, loved word in India today, Hindutva, which is something that Savarkar was the one who popularized that. And I think Lipika, at the bottom of this entire thing is also lies another very important distortion in our history about how we actually got our freedom. Today is 23rd March, and I hope we all remember that today is Shahid Divas. Today is the day Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev and Rajguru were executed and their supreme sacrifice made for the cause of this country's freedom. But then when we have popular media, parrot out nonsense like "De di hame azadi bina khadg bina dhal, Sabarmati ke sant tune kar diya kamal," it actually does a lot of disservice to the thousands, if not lakhs of brave revolutionaries, starting from maybe the Paika rebellion downwards to Birsa Munda, to the 1857 revolution, to all the Marathi, Bengali, Punjabi, various other revolutionaries in different parts of India and even outside, the Gadar movement, and then the Indian National Army of Rash Bihari Bose and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, this complete chain of unending armed resistance of the revolutionaries. It does a lot of disservice to them. The kind of atrocities and tortures that people who were political prisoners, not one congressman was lodged in the Port Blair, Kalapani, dungeons of hell, where the kind of tortures that they suffered. But today if we ask ourselves, can we name 5 people who were lodged in Port Blair in the Kalapani? Other than of course Savarkar. Can we think of 5 names? Anybody who can come up with 3 or 2 names? Not Shefali is not allowed to answer that. See, that is the problem. Where, can we please have a little bit of silence there? Excuse me?
Yeah.
So, the kind of tortures that they faced where, not even good food being given to them, basi khana, eating which most of the prisoners ended up with diarrhea, and they were fixed time of going even to the washroom, only in the morning and the night. And because of diarrhea, if you needed to go repeatedly, then you were not allowed to go. And most of these people were defecating and urinating in their small little cells. Imagine standing, sleeping, sitting and eating amidst your own squalor. And in the blazing heat of Port Blair, you have the Koluka Bail punishment, where instead of the bullock, you had the freedom fighter yoked to one end of the oil grinding machine. All through the day in that blazing heat where you were not even given a drop of water if you needed it, you had to extract 30 pounds of oil. And even 1 ounce less, you are whiplashed, you are not given food. No medical treatment given. Standing handcuffs punishment for 6 months. Solitary confinement. Savarkar himself lived in a cell which oversaw the gallows, where every day the only human contact you have was to people being dragged and hanged to their death. These kind of tortures where many of these young revolutionaries who were probably in their late teens or early 20s, they could not take it. Most of them committed suicide, or some of them even lost their sanity because of the immense tortures. And today, we sitting in air-conditioned rooms, we pass certificates of who is a patriot, who is a collaborator, who did this and who did what. The very fact that we are all living in a country and can breathe in free air is thanks to the sacrifices of so many thousands of unnamed people. It says a lot that we can't recall even 4-5 names of people lodged in Kalapani. I don't know how many of us have taken our children there to show them that this is a pilgrimage center and we are free because of them. What an ungrateful nation can we be? So I think, the way we understand our past hits at the very root of our identity about ourselves. Who are our heroes? Who are our anti-heroes? I think it tells us a lot about all of this. And I think Savarkar somewhere brings in all these varied aspects, which are very uncomfortable to face in the eye and address for people today.
The fact that we are the only civilization that has continued to survive is because of the resilience of the people who fought to keep it alive. And I think as historians of today, there is an opportunity, there is a path that Vikram has chalked out for many of us to follow and tell stories of the kind of resilience, the kind of fight we put up. He has captured quite a few of those brave hearts, both men and women, in his book, Brave Hearts of Bharat. Before we move towards the last part of this conversation, any 2 questions? Please keep them as questions alone. Please don't, let's have 2 quick questions from the audience, please. Can we have a mic? Maybe one from the right and one from the left would work. All the other questions can be taken after the session. I've got 2 parchees already to wrap up. But since we have Vikram here only for 1 session, I would like to make the most of it. So probably, yes, there at the back, the young, the young person. No, the young girl. Yeah, please. I would rather have young people put their questions to Vikram. Yeah.
Hello, sir. Welcome to the land of Lord Jagannath, first of all.
Thank you.
Sir, I am Pragya and I would like to ask you a question that today you told about the history and about all those freedom fighters and everything, about Tipu Sultan, Savarkar and everything. And you told that we, the young generation, we are having mobile phone in our hand with the internet connection and we can get to know about anyone about whom we want to know. But sir, I would like to ask you about this, that don't you think that the education system is also a part of this thing, which needs to tell us that about whom we should supposed to be reading about, who should be our idols? Because in our NCERT books you will find it's all about the foreign invaders, whereas about our own rulers, we just have a paragraph or it's only about a case study, which is not important even from the point of view of examination. So what would you have a message for the education system and for the youngsters? That's my question, sir.
Thank you. That was an excellent question. Applause to you. I think our young people know it. It's just that, the education minister of this country comes from this state. So I think a message needs to go from all of you to him and not be one of those HRD ministers we had in the past who said not a word or comma was changed in history textbooks almost proudly, whereas it's something to be very ashamed of. You're so right that, history of India, seen as a history through the eyes of invasions. Long litany list of battles that we as India and Indians lost, right from the Arab invasion to the battles of Panipat, Battle of Terrain, Battle of Buxar, Battle of Plassey, Anglo-Mysore War, Anglo-Maratha War, Anglo-Sikh Wars. What is the common thread in all of that? We as India and Indians lost. Now, if we are around today as the only pre-Bronze Age era civilization, now there must have been some wars that our poor ancestors, they won also. Some amount of courage these poor people showed. So where are those stories of those heroes and more importantly heroines also? A lot of women in our history where history shouldn't become his story, where her story is also important to address. So it is important. It's the most important, and as you rightly said, education system is the only way. Things can be scalable at a large level, but it's a very good question addressed to a wrong person because I don't have any eyes, ears or, this thing in the government. So it's up to them to change. It takes so long to create that dying need for change, which they need to do. The message needs to go from this very state, maybe the shankhanad of change in history to the person who represents you in the union cabinet. That is important. But till the time that happens, instead of complaining, these are small steps we take. What FIHCR initiatives I mentioned and others. That's the way maybe to go forward.
And very important steps. Yes, just one more question, please.
Such an honor to have Her Highness, the Princess of Travancore, amidst us. Namaste.
Thank you, Vikram sir. Sir, I had a question that personally when I read history, I know that there are behavioral changes that I undergo when I see the glorious ancestry. I want to know specifically from your works, what is the behavioral change you expect in today's youth reading your work in two specific domains? One is scholarship and one is innovation.
One is?
Scholarship, one is innovation. In these two domains, what is the behavior change you expect from reading your works in today's youth?
I wouldn't say only mine, but the very fact that, history is that operating system, which, as I said earlier, when you have a sense of identity, when you have a sense of pride, and when I talk of pride, it is not blind, jingoism. Mera Bharat Mahan, everything about our past is great, we invented the internet and, flying machines. I don't want to get into that sort of looniness. But genuine pride for the centuries of achievements of our ancestors in various fields. It could be physical resistance, it could also be innovations. What were Indians doing in terms of knowledge creation in various streams, whether it was mathematics, sciences, medicine, mind-body, holistic understanding, alchemy, all of this, yoga now, gaining ground all over the world. Our understanding and philosophy of life, our, classical arts, and art forms. So an understanding of Indian knowledge as it has been produced in the past, and feel that genuine sense of pride and ownership. And when you have that sense of both pride and ownership, naturally the way you move forward, when you think that this is my house, you will ensure you'll keep it clean, you'll ensure that it is well maintained. If you're looking at it as somebody else's work to do, some government has to do something, it will be a behavioral change also in the way you look at your own country, your own people and your own society. So I think at that very fundamental level, which is why I said history becomes so important, a discipline to shape our own idea of who we are and what we see about ourselves, our self-concept. And that is exactly what our colonial masters understood and hence destroyed. And we, in 75 years, we have unfortunately not done anything substantial to reverse that, what seems like an irreversible process.
Well, in the last 6 months, we've had several conversations, Vikram, and every time you and I are on the stage, I go back with a new nugget. And thank you so much, Vikram, for braving your way into this bad world of history writing and still, bringing us stories. You write big fat books, not all, but some of them are big and fat, but still, the interest in history has revived, which is very important. May Ishwar bless you with more power to your pen, and may you continue to produce not just your own books, also mentor many more people. Thank you so much for your time today at the Kalinga Lit Fest. I would like to thank Mr. Ashok Bal and Rashmi Ranjanji for having me here and share this stage with this brilliant mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being such a patient audience, and to the Kalinga Lit Fest for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you
Jai
so
Jagannath.
much. Yes, let's give a big round of applause. Come on, ladies and gentlemen. What an interesting session this was. And I would like to request Ashok ji, the KLF mentor and patron, to please come on dais and also do the honors of felicitating our panelists. Please. What an interesting session indeed.
It's always a pleasure to have Lipika. Living the dream.
Hey, need a chair. Need a chair पकाओ जल्दी. Need a chair कहाँ पके chair पकाओ chair. How to take it?